I'm Justin, 35 years old, and my own mother told me my son wasn't welcome at Thanksgiving because he wasn't a well-behaved kid. Before I tell you how that single text message led to them losing their house, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It helps to know I'm not alone in this. It all started on a Tuesday, 3 days before Thanksgiving. The air in our small apartment was filled with the clean scent of laundry and the quiet rustle of my 8-year-old son, Leo, cutting construction paper leaves for a school project at the kitchen table. He was humming a little tune from a cartoon, completely absorbed. It was one of those perfect, peaceful domestic moments you wish you could bottle up. My phone buzzed on the counter where I was folding towels. I glanced at the screen. It was my mother, Eleanor. I smiled, expecting a last-minute question about the catering I'd arranged for the big family dinner. For the past 3 years, I'd been secretly covering the cost of the entire Thanksgiving feast. I never told them. I just wanted everyone to have a good time without the stress. My consulting job paid well, and it felt like the least I could do. I picked up the phone and my smile evaporated. The message wasn't a question. It was a declaration. It read, "Justin, just confirming plans for Thursday. We've decided to do Thanksgiving with just the well-behaved kids this year to keep things calm. Daniel's kids are coming, of course. Yours can skip this year." I read it once, then twice. The words swam in front of my eyes. Yours. As if Leo was a package, an object. Not her grandson. Can skip this year. Like it was a privilege he hadn't earned. Dad? Is everything okay? Leo's small voice cut through the ringing in my ears. He had padded over from the table, his paper leaves forgotten. His eyes, big and brown and full of concern, were fixed on my face. Before I could hide the screen, he saw the words. I saw the moment his face fell. I watched his lower lip begin to tremble. "Did I do something bad, Dad?" He whispered, and that was it. That was the sound of my heart breaking. A single tear rolled down his cheek, then another. He tried to stifle a sob, but it escaped, a gut-wrenching little gasp. He buried his face in my shirt, and his small body shook with quiet, hiccuping cries. Holding him, I felt a rage so cold and clear it was like ice water flooding my veins. This wasn't about a misbehaved child. Leo was the kindest, gentlest kid I knew. This was a punishment. For me. And they were using my son, my innocent son, as the weapon. In that moment, something inside me snapped. The part of me that had spent 35 years desperately seeking their approval, their love, their acknowledgement, it just died. I held Leo tight with one arm, and with the other, I picked up my phone. My thumb hovered over my mom's contact, and then I swiped away. I opened my email, found the confirmation from the caterer. Then the rental company for the extra tables and chairs. Then the bakery for the pies. My fingers moved with a calm, deliberate certainty. Cancel, cancel, cancel. I texted my mom back a simple 2-word reply. Understood. Then I opened my banking app, found the credit card linked to the event, and froze it. A new message popped up from my family's group chat. It was a selfie of my mom, my dad Richard, and my brother Daniel all grinning. The caption read, "Getting excited for a peaceful, drama-free Thanksgiving." Winking face, I looked down at the top of my son's head, still nestled against my chest. They had no idea what was coming. And for the first time in my life, I didn't care. To understand why I did what I did, you have to understand my brother, Daniel. Daniel was the son my parents orbited. He was the golden child. I was the other one. It had always been that way. I have this one memory that's burned into my brain. I was 10, and I'd saved up my allowance for months to buy a beat-up, second-hand BMX bike. I spent a whole weekend fixing it, sanding down the rust, spray painting it a glossy black. I was so proud. I rode it onto the lawn to show my dad, my face beaming. He glanced up from his newspaper and grunted. "Nice, Justin. Don't scratch the paint." 2 weeks later, it was Daniel's 12th birthday. In the middle of the driveway, gleaming in the sun, was a brand new, top-of-the-line mountain bike with 21 gears and shock absorbers. Cost more than my parents made in a week. Daniel rode it twice and then left it in the garage to rust. But when my dad talked about it, his chest puffed out. "That boy, he's a natural athlete," he'd say. "Just has a gift." It was the same with everything. Daniel got straight C's and they'd say, "He's just not challenged by school, he's too smart for it." I'd bring home an A-, and my mom would ask, "What happened to the other 5%? He crashed his first car." A car they bought for him, and they said, "The roads were slick. I got a single speeding ticket paid for with my own money from my part-time job, and I was lectured for a month about irresponsibility." This pattern continued into adulthood. I worked my way through college, juggling classes and 2 jobs. I built a career from nothing, starting in a cubicle and climbing my way up to a senior consultant position. My success was met with a sort of polite, distant acknowledgement, as if it were an anomaly they couldn't quite understand. Daniel, on the other hand, drifted. He bounced from job to job, always with a grand excuse. The boss was an idiot, the work was beneath him, the commute was too long. My parents co-signed for his apartments, paid his bills when he was in between opportunities, and constantly sang his praises. "Daniel is finding himself," my mom would say, with a tone that implied he was on some noble spiritual quest instead of just being lazy. He met his wife, Jessica, and they had 2 kids in quick succession. My parents were ecstatic. They transformed into doting, obsessed grandparents. Every weekend was spent at Daniel's house. Every holiday was a shrine to his perfect little family. Their photos were all over the mantelpiece. Daniel, the successful son. Jessica, the perfect daughter-in-law. Their 2 beautiful, well-behaved children. It was a perfect picture. A picture that I, and later my son, were never quite a part of. We were always on the edge of the frame, slightly out of focus. The day I found out I was going to be a father was the happiest day of my life. Leo's mother and I were young, and honestly, we weren't ready for the long haul as a couple, but we were both absolutely committed to being great parents. Our eventual divorce was amicable, built on mutual respect and a shared promise to always put our son first. The custody arrangement was simple. We were a team. When I called my parents to tell them the news, the line went quiet. I could hear the TV murmuring in the background. "Oh," my mother finally said. Her voice was flat. "Are you sure?" "Yes, Mom, I'm sure. Isn't it great?" "Well, Justin, it's unexpected. Your career is just taking off. It's a lot of responsibility." There was no joy, no excitement. It was treated like a problem, a complication in the neat narrative they had for my life. When Daniel had announced Jessica was pregnant, they'd thrown a party. When I told them, they gave me a lecture on financial planning. The difference was stark and painful. When Leo was born, they visited the hospital for exactly 15 minutes. My dad held him awkwardly for a moment, said, "He's got your ears," and handed him back. My mom didn't even hold him. She just peered into the bassinet and said, "Well, I hope he's a quiet baby." Compare that to the birth of Daniel's son a year later. They stayed at the hospital for hours. They bought out half the gift shop. My mother's photo album has an entire section dedicated to it. The day our first real grandson was born. She didn't say the word real to my face, of course. She didn't have to. It was in every action. The most telling example was their first birthdays. For my nephew's party, my parents rented a bouncy castle and hired a professional photographer. They bought him a miniature electric car he was too young to even use. The gifts were piled high, a monument to their affection. For Leo's first birthday, we had a small gathering at my apartment. My parents showed up an hour late and handed me a small, neatly wrapped box. Inside was a set of plain, beige socks. "Babies always need socks," my mom said, as if she were bestowing some great wisdom. That was it. No toy, no book, just socks. It was a gesture so dismissive, so utterly devoid of warmth, that it felt worse than if they hadn't come at all. The baby showers, the other birthdays, the holidays, it was a constant, low-grade humiliation. They'd rave about how brilliant my nephew was for being able to stack blocks. But when Leo started reading at age 4, my mom just said, "Let's hope it doesn't make him antisocial." I tried. God, I tried. I invited them to his t-ball games. They were always busy. I sent them his school pictures. They'd say, "Oh, that's nice," and change the subject. They never babysat, not even for an hour. They never called just to ask how he was doing. Leo, in his innocent heart, didn't understand. He'd ask, "Why doesn't Grandma come to my games like she does for Cousin Michael?" And I'd have to make up some excuse, some gentle lie to protect him from a truth I could barely accept myself. They simply didn't love him the way they loved their other grandchildren. They didn't see him. He was my son, not theirs, an extension of the son who had always been a disappointment. About a year before the Thanksgiving incident, I got a strange call from my dad. He was flustered, talking in circles about some paperwork and a mix-up at the bank. He finally got to the point. They were a month behind on their mortgage and were at risk of default. "I don't know how it happened, Justin," he stammered. "The interest rates, they went up. We're in a real bind." I felt a familiar pang of responsibility. It was the house I grew up in. The idea of them losing it, of all those memories being auctioned off on the courthouse steps, was unbearable. I told him not to worry, that I would take care of it. But something felt off. My parents were usually frugal. A sudden mortgage problem seemed out of character. So I did something I'd never done before. I did some digging. Because my name had been on the deed years ago for a brief period for inheritance reasons, I was able to make a discreet inquiry. What I found made my stomach turn. They hadn't just fallen behind on their old mortgage. They had taken out a massive second mortgage on the house 3 months prior. A home equity line of credit. And they had already drained it. All of it. I knew instantly where the money went. It was the same week Daniel had rolled up to a family barbecue driving a brand new, metallic blue BMW, the kind with a price tag that looked like a phone number. He'd bragged about his new promotion and the great financing deal he got. It was all a lie. My parents hadn't just helped him. They had risked their entire financial future, their home, for his vanity. They had gambled the roof over their heads for a luxury car for their golden child. I felt a surge of white-hot anger. I drove over to their house, the bank statement clutched in my hand. I confronted my dad in the garage, right next to the dusty relics of my childhood. "A BMW, Dad? You leveraged the house for a car." He couldn't meet my eyes. He just shuffled his feet and stared at a crack in the concrete. "Daniel, he needed it for his job, for his image. It was an investment in his future." "An investment? You're about to be foreclosed on. What about your future?" "We thought we could handle the payments," he mumbled. Daniel was supposed to help out, but Daniel never helped out. That was the one constant in our lives. I should have walked away. I should have let them face the consequences of their insane favoritism. A part of me, the angry, wounded part, screamed at me to do just that. But the other part, the part that still saw this as the only family I had, couldn't do it. So I fixed it. I went to the bank and paid the arrears directly. It was a significant amount of money. A chunk of what I'd been saving for a down payment on a house for me and Leo. A piece of our future, sacrificed to clean up their mess. When I told them it was handled, there was a brief moment of relief, followed by a swift and chilling return to normalcy. There was no real gratitude, no apology. It was as if they expected it. It was my duty, as the responsible son, to fix the problems created by their coddling of the irresponsible one. I told myself it was the last time. I drew a line in the sand of my own heart. But I was just lying to myself. The line had already been washed away. Thanksgiving morning arrived crisp and bright. While the rest of my family was presumably getting ready for a feast that would never arrive, Leo and I were in the kitchen, making pancake batter. We decided to have our own celebration. No turkey, no stress, just us. We made pancakes shaped like dinosaurs, watched the Macy's parade on TV, and built a massive pillow fort in the living room. For the first time in years, I felt the pure, uncomplicated joy of the holiday. There was no tension, no walking on eggshells, no forced smiles. It was just peaceful. My phone, however, was not peaceful. It started buzzing around 1 p.m. The group chat came alive. First, a picture from Jessica, my sister-in-law. It was a selfie of her and Daniel's kids, all dressed up. "Ready for turkey. Can't wait to see the spread you ordered, Mom." Then, a photo from my dad of the perfectly set dining table, empty platters waiting to be filled. The calm before the delicious storm. My mother chimed in with a picture of her and my dad, glasses of wine in hand. A toast to family that behaves. We're so grateful for a peaceful day. The wink emoji at the end was like a little twist of the knife. They were rubbing it in, performing for an audience of one. Me. They wanted me to feel what I was missing. They wanted me to feel the sting of my son's exclusion. I looked at Leo, who was currently giggling as he put a tiny pillow on his head for a hat in our fort. The sting wasn't there. There was only a cold, detached pity for them. The text stopped around 2:30 p.m. Then, at 2:45 p.m., my phone rang. It was Daniel. I let it go to voicemail. He called back immediately. I ignored it again. Then a text came through. Hey, where's the food? A minute later, another. Seriously, Justin, Mom's starting to freak out. The caterer isn't here. And another. Did you talk to them? Did you pay the deposit? The kids are starving. I took a bite of the simple turkey sandwich Leo and I had made for our lunch. It was the best Thanksgiving meal I'd ever had. I finally picked up my phone and typed a reply to Daniel. I have no idea what you're talking about. I canceled my card. I could almost hear the explosion from across town. His reply was a string of frantic question marks. I put my phone on silent and turned back to the movie Leo had picked. It was a cartoon about a friendly dragon. It was perfect. The calls kept coming. My dad. My mom. Daniel again. I ignored them all. I imagined the scene at their house. The confusion turning to panic, the blame game starting. I pictured the empty platters, the hungry children, the magnificent collapse of their perfectly planned, peaceful day, and I felt nothing but a profound sense of relief. The storm had finally broken, and I was safely out of the rain. After the Thanksgiving disaster, there was a week of angry, garbled voicemails which I deleted without listening to, followed by a week of stony silence. Then, my mother called from a number I didn't recognize. Her voice was syrupy sweet. Justin, honey, we were all just so worried about you. There was a terrible misunderstanding with the caterer. I didn't say anything. Listen, she continued, her voice softening. I know we got our wires crossed, and I feel just awful that Leo felt left out. Your father and I want to make it up to him. We want to take him Christmas shopping. Just him. Our treat. A warning bell went off in my head. But a smaller, stupider part of me felt a flicker of hope. Maybe they realized they'd gone too far. Maybe they wanted to fix it. And when I told Leo, his face lit up with such pure, unadulterated joy that I couldn't say no. He spent the entire evening making a list, carefully printing the names of the gifts he wanted to buy for me, for his mom, and for his friends, clutching the $20 he'd saved in his piggy bank. I'm going shopping with Grandma and Grandpa, he told me, his eyes shining. Just me. I dropped him off at their house on Saturday morning. He ran to the door, his little list clutched in his hand. My mom hugged him, a stiff, awkward gesture. We're going to have so much fun, she said, smiling at me over his head. For hours later, they dropped him back off. The moment I saw his face, I knew. The light was gone. He walked past me without a word. His shoulders slumped, and went straight to his room, closing the door softly behind him. I followed him and found him sitting on his bed, staring at a small, cheap-looking snowman keychain in his hand. It was the only shopping bag he had. Hey, buddy, I said gently. How was it? He wouldn't look at me. He just shrugged. It took me 20 minutes of patient, quiet questioning to get the story out of him, bit by painful bit. They hadn't taken him shopping for him. They had taken him along while they shopped for Daniel's kids. They'd spent hours in the Lego store, the American Girl store, the electronics department, buying mountains of expensive gifts for my nephews. Leo was just there. He trailed behind them, a silent little ghost. At one point, my dad handed him a few bags to carry. They never asked him what he wanted. They never looked at his list. When he tried to show it to my mom, she'd patted his head and said, "That's nice, dear, but Grandma is very busy right now." The final blow came in the food court. They bought him a pretzel while they discussed their purchases. Leo, thinking this was finally his chance, took out his $20 bill to buy a small Lego set he'd seen. But as he stood up, he overheard my grandmother talking to my grandfather at the table. "I'm so glad we got all this done for the real grandkids," she'd said, her voice low. "At least this way we get it all out of the way in one trip." My dad had chuckled. "Well," he'd said, "at least we don't have to worry about this one acting out in public." Leo told me this in a whisper, his voice thick with tears he was trying desperately not to shed. He'd quietly put his $20 bill back in his pocket, sat down, and didn't say another word for the rest of the trip. The snowman keychain was something my mom had grabbed from a checkout bin at the last second. "Here," she'd said, pressing it into his hand, "so you don't feel left out." As he finished his story, I sat on the edge of his bed, my knuckles white where I gripped the comforter. A hot, powerless rage surged up my throat, and I had to swallow it down, forcing my voice to stay soft for him. It was a physical effort to keep my hands from shaking. This wasn't just neglect. It was a calculated act of psychological cruelty against a child. They had manufactured his hope just so they could enjoy crushing it. I looked at the cheap plastic snowman in his hand. It seemed to mock us, a tiny symbol of their hollow, performative affection. In that moment, any lingering shred of hope I had for them, any nostalgic attachment to the idea of family, was incinerated. I pulled my son into a hug, my own eyes burning. "It's not your fault," I whispered into his hair. "You did nothing wrong. You hear me? Nothing." 2 weeks before Christmas, my doorbell rang. It was late, already dark out. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole and my stomach clenched. It was my father, Richard, standing on my doorstep, shifting his weight from foot to foot. He looked smaller than I remembered, and his shoulders were hunched under his thin jacket. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. He stood on the welcome mat, a blast of cold air swirling around him. "Justin," he said, his voice raspy, "we need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about," I said, my voice as cold as the air between us. "Don't be like that. I need your help." He wouldn't look at me, focusing instead on a spot over my shoulder. "It's about the car. Daniel's car." Of course it was. It was always about Daniel. "There were some complications," he stammered. "Fees, penalties for late payments on the insurance. A couple of tickets he forgot to mention. The registration is suspended. It's a real mess. If we don't clear it up, they could impound it." He finally looked at me, and his eyes were filled with a desperate, pleading look I knew all too well. It was the look he got whenever he was asking me to clean up one of Daniel's messes. "I just need a little bit to tide us over," he said, "to get it all sorted. We're family, Justin. You don't turn your back on family." The word family hung in the air, obscene and hollow. "Family?" I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. "Let me ask you something, Dad. Is Leo family?" He flinched, the first genuine reaction I'd seen from him all night. He opened his mouth, then closed it. The silence was his answer. It was all the answer I ever needed. "Is he family when you tell him he's not welcome in your home for a holiday?" I pressed on, the words like stones I was finally allowed to throw. "Is he family when you use him as a pack mule to carry presents for your real grandkids? Is he family when you break his heart and don't even have the decency to apologize?" He just stood there, speechless. "The answer is no," I said, the words clear and final. "I'm done. I'm done paying for your mistakes. I'm done cleaning up after Daniel. And I am done letting you treat my son like he is less than nothing." I reached for the door. "My money, from now on, is for Leo's future. It's for his college fund. It's for a life where he knows he is loved and valued. It is not for the insurance penalties on a luxury car for a 37-year-old man-child." His face crumpled. For a second I thought he might cry, but there was no pity left in me. "You should go," I said, and I closed the door in his face. I leaned against it, my heart hammering in my chest. It wasn't a victory. It didn't feel good. It just felt necessary. Felt like the end. The next day I made 2 calls. The first was to Dr. Anya Sharma, a child psychologist I'd found who had incredible reviews. Leo was trying to be brave, but I could see the shadows of the shopping trip lingering in his eyes. He was quieter, more withdrawn. I needed help. I needed someone to give him the tools to process a hurt that no 8-year-old should ever have to understand. Dr. Sharma was incredible. She was warm and insightful. In our first session, just with me, she listened patiently as the whole ugly story spilled out of me. She didn't judge. She just nodded, her expression full of compassion. "Justin," she said when I was done, her voice gentle but firm, "you need to understand that their behavior is not a reflection of your son's worth. It's a reflection of their own brokenness. Your only job right now is to be his shield. By setting these boundaries, you are not punishing them. You are protecting him. You're doing the right thing." Hearing those words from a professional, an impartial observer, felt like a weight being lifted off my shoulders. It wasn't just my anger talking. It was my parental instinct. I was being a father. My second call was to a lawyer, a good one, specializing in financial and family law. I explained the situation with the house, the second mortgage, the constant demands for money. I told him I wanted to make sure my finances were completely firewalled from my family's chaos. "You were smart to call," he told me, his voice all business. "We can set up a trust for your son's college fund that is completely untouchable. We can review your own assets and make sure everything is structured to protect you." Given their history, I wouldn't be surprised if they try to make a legal claim down the line, perhaps arguing you have a duty of care, or something equally baseless. We need to be prepared. We spent an hour on the phone, mapping out a strategy. It felt strange, almost cold-blooded, to be legally fortifying myself against my own parents. But Dr. Sharma's words echoed in my head. I wasn't punishing them. I was protecting my son. My salary, my savings, my future, it all belonged to Leo. I would not let their irresponsibility and favoritism jeopardize that. Walking out of the lawyer's office a few days later, having signed the paperwork for Leo's trust, I felt a sense of calm I hadn't felt in years. I couldn't control them. I couldn't change them or make them love my son. But I could control what I did. I could build a wall around our life, a fortress of security and peace. The storm was still raging outside, but for the first time, I felt like we were safe inside. The week after I turned my father away, the silence from my family was deafening. I knew it was the calm before another, more vicious storm. It came not as a phone call, but as a text message on a quiet Wednesday night. It was from my mother. I was reading a book to Leo in bed. He was half asleep, his head heavy on my shoulder. My phone vibrated on the nightstand. I picked it up, expecting it to be a work email. But it was her name on the screen. My hand tightened on the phone. The message was a single, monstrous paragraph. "I see you've made your choice. You'd rather hold onto your money than help your own family. Your father came home devastated. I don't know what we ever did to make you so cruel, so heartless. We always knew you'd punish us for not loving your mistake. Your mistake." The words seemed to leap off the screen and hang in the air, poisonous and black. My mistake. She was talking about Leo, my son. The beautiful, kind, funny little boy sleeping peacefully beside me. My reason for living. A mistake. Couldn't breathe. My throat closed up. All the anger, all the hurt, all the years of feeling second best. It all coalesced into a single point of white-hot pain right in the center of my chest. This was it. This was who she was. Not a misguided mother. Not a flawed person trying her best. She was a cruel woman who saw her own grandchild as a mistake. I looked down at Leo, at his long eyelashes resting on his cheek, at the gentle rise and fall of his chest. He was perfect. He was the best thing that had ever happened to me. I didn't reply to the text. There was nothing left to say. Words were useless against that kind of poison. With a strange, detached calm, I opened my contacts. I found her name. I tapped, "Block this caller." Then I did the same for my father. For Daniel. For Jessica. For every aunt, uncle, and cousin who had ever stood by and watched it happen. One by one, I erased them from my life. Took less than a minute. When it was done, I set the phone down. The silence in the room was different now. It wasn't tense. It was clean. It was the silence of a fever that has finally broken. The war was over. I hadn't won. I had just survived. And I had saved my son. That was enough. 2 weeks of blessed, uninterrupted silence passed. It was like coming up for air after being held underwater for years. Leo was doing better. His sessions with Dr. Sharma were helping, and our quiet, peaceful life was a balm for his bruised heart. At work, things were reaching a critical point. I was in the final stages of landing the biggest client of my career, a massive tech firm led by a notoriously brilliant but demanding CEO, a man named Robert Thompson. This wasn't just another contract. Landing this account would mean a major promotion, a significant salary increase, and the kind of career security that would guarantee Leo and I would never have to worry about anything again. I'd been competing against a rival consultant, Liam, a smarmy guy who played dirty, but I knew my proposal was better. I poured everything I had into it. The final meeting was scheduled to take place at my home office. Thompson was old school. He believed you could learn more about a person by seeing their home environment than you could in any boardroom. It was unorthodox, but I agreed. I wanted him to see the life I had built, the order and calm I had cultivated. The morning of the meeting, my apartment was spotless. My presentation was rehearsed to perfection. I was dressed in my best suit, feeling a nervous but confident energy thrumming through me. This was it. This was the moment that could change everything. Mr. Thompson arrived precisely on time. He was an imposing man in his late 60s, with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through you. He shook my hand firmly. "Justin, good to see you again." "Thompson. Mr. Thompson, thank you for coming. Please, come in." I led him to my home office. He glanced around, taking in the neat bookshelves, the framed photos of Leo, the clean lines of the desk. He nodded, a small, approving gesture. "I like a man who's organized," he said. "Shows a clear mind." We sat down and I began my presentation. I was in the zone. The words flowed easily, the data points connecting, painting a clear picture of the value I could bring to his company. He listened intently, asking sharp, insightful questions. He wasn't just listening, he was testing me, pushing me, and I was meeting every challenge. We were about an hour in at the absolute crucial point where we were discussing the final terms of the contract. The documents were laid out on the table between us. I could feel it, I was so close. The promotion was within my grasp. My heart was pounding with anticipation. And then the doorbell rang. Not a polite chime, but a frantic, insistent mashing of the button, over and over again. I froze. My blood ran cold. I knew, with a sinking, horrifying certainty, who it was. "Excuse me for one moment, Mr. Thompson," I said, my voice tight. "I'll be right back." I walked to the door, my mind racing. "Not now. Please, not now." I opened it, and my worst fears were realized. There on my doorstep, looking disheveled and furious, were my mother, my father, and my brother Daniel. "We need to talk to you, Justin," my mother hissed, trying to push past me into the apartment. "This is not a good time," I said, blocking the doorway with my body. My voice was low, laced with a warning. "You need to leave. Now." "We are not leaving." Daniel spat, his face red and blotchy. "You think you can just cut us off? Steal our money?" "Your money?" I asked, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "I haven't seen a dime of your money my entire life, Daniel. Only the other way around." "Don't you talk to your brother like that," my father boomed, stepping forward. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? By leaving us high and dry? We could lose the house because of you." The accusation was so ludicrous, so completely detached from reality, that all I could do was stare at them. They had created this mess, from start to finish, and here they were, standing on my doorstep, trying to blame me for it. "I am in the middle of a very important meeting," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "The most important meeting of my life. You will leave now or I will call the police." My mother let out a theatrical gasp. "You would call the police on your own mother?" "Oh, You are a cruel, selfish boy. I told you, Richard. He's heartless. He doesn't care about family. He only cares about himself and that boy. She couldn't even say his name. The scene was escalating, their voices getting louder, more frantic. It was the ugliest, most pathetic display I had ever witnessed. They were a Greek chorus of victimhood and entitlement, performing their final, desperate act on my welcome mat. And then, a calm, authoritative voice cut through the chaos from behind me. Is there a problem here? I turned. Mr. Thompson was standing in the hallway, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. He had heard everything. Every lie, every accusation, every poisonous word. My heart sank. It was over. My career, my promotion, my future. All of it ruined by the three people who were supposed to love me most. My family froze, their mouths hanging open as they took in the sight of the impeccably dressed, powerful-looking man standing in my apartment. Mr. Thompson's sharp eyes moved from my mother's furious face to my father's weak chin to Daniel's petulant scowl. He took it all in, a silent, damning assessment. Then his gaze settled on me. "Justin," he said, his voice ringing with clarity in the sudden silence. "I've heard enough. I apologize for the interruption to your life." He then turned his steely gaze back to my family. "As for you people, I suggest you leave the premises before he does, in fact, have to call the police. This is harassment." He stepped back into my office. My family stood there, utterly stunned into silence. I gave them one last look, not of anger but of pity, and closed the door. I walked back into the office, my shoulders slumped in defeat. "Mr. Thompson," I started. "I am so sorry. I can't apologize enough for what you just witnessed." He held up a hand. "Don't apologize, son. I've been in business for 40 years. I know character when I see it, both the good and the bad." He picked up the pen from the desk. "I was going to offer you the standard 5-year contract," he said, looking me straight in the eye. "But based on the level of professionalism and grace under pressure I've just witnessed, I'm doubling it. 10 years. And we're increasing the compensation package by 20%. You've earned it." He signed the contract with a flourish and pushed it across the desk to me. I stared at the document, then at him, speechless. The validation, the vindication, it was so overwhelming it almost brought me to my tears. In front of the very people who had spent a lifetime telling me I wasn't good enough, my worth had just been affirmed and rewarded in the most spectacular way possible. I picked up the pen, my hand steady, and signed my name. This is the moment that changed everything, when I finally took back control of my own life. Thank you for sticking with me this far. You are amazing. Please help me out by liking this video and commenting the number 1 down below, just so I know you've been on this journey with me. It not only helps more people find this story, but it also lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone out there. Your support is the biggest motivation for me to keep sharing the rest of my journey. After Mr. Thompson left, a sense of profound, quiet calm settled over me. I had the signed contract on my desk, a symbol of a future I had built for myself on my own terms. The shouting outside had stopped. I looked through the peephole. They were still there, huddled on the sidewalk, looking lost and defeated. I took a deep breath, opened the door, and walked out to face them one last time. They all looked up as I approached, their expressions a mixture of confusion and residual anger. "It's over," I said, my voice even and devoid of emotion. "This is the last time you will come to my home. This is the last time we will speak." "Justin, you don't understand." My father began, his voice pleading. "No," I interrupted, holding up a hand. "I understand perfectly. For the first time in my life, I see everything with perfect clarity. I see who you are. All of you." I looked at my mother. "You called my son a mistake. There is nothing you can ever say or do to fix that. There is no apology that can erase those words." I turned to Daniel. "You are a black hole of need and entitlement, and I will not let you suck my life away anymore. You are on your own." And finally, I looked at my father. "You stood by and let it all happen. Your silence was your consent. That makes you just as guilty." They stared at me, their faces ashen. The fight had gone out of them, replaced by a dawning, horrified realization that they had truly, irrevocably, lost. They had overplayed their hand and their trump card. My guilt, my sense of duty was gone. The house? My mother whispered, her voice trembling. What about the house? That was your choice, I said. You chose a car over your home. You chose him. I nodded at Daniel. Over your own security. Those are your consequences to live with, not mine. I turned and walked back to my apartment without another word. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. As I closed the door, I felt the final chain break. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't hurt. I was just free. The storm hadn't just faded. It had passed for good. A few days later, I got a call from a number I did recognize, but hadn't heard from in years. It was Mrs. Gable, the sweet elderly woman who had lived across the street from my parents my whole life. She had always been kind to me, slipping me cookies over the fence when I was a kid. Justin, dear, she said, her voice full of concern. I just wanted to check on you. There was a terrible commotion at your parents' house the other day. I saw them when they got home from wherever they were, shouting, crying. It was awful. I'm okay, Mrs. Gable, I said. Thank you for calling. I feel I have to tell you something, she continued, her voice dropping lower. Your Aunt Sarah was over there right after. I saw her car. And Justin, I know she puts on a sweet face, but that woman. She was stirring the pot. I could hear them through my window. She was telling your mother that you were arrogant, that you were trying to destroy the family. She was feeding their anger. It was the final, missing piece of the puzzle. My Aunt Sarah, my father's sister, had always played the role of the sympathetic mediator. She would call me after every family blow-up, sighing dramatically. Oh, Justin, you know how your mother is. You just have to be the bigger person. She would listen to my frustrations, nodding and making sympathetic noises. All along, she had been playing both sides, a secret arsonist who loved the warmth of the family fire she helped set. She thrived on the drama. It was a small, petty betrayal in the grand scheme of things, but it was illuminating. It confirmed what I already knew in my gut. The entire system was toxic. There wasn't a single healthy branch on the family tree. Thank you for telling me, Mrs. Gable, I said, and I meant it. Her words were a gift, another piece of validation that I had done the right thing. After we hung up, I thought about the image she had painted. My parents, my brother, my aunt, all trapped in their house, spinning in their own hurricane of blame and resentment. And I felt a profound sense of gratitude, not because they were suffering, but because I was no longer in there with them. The shattered pieces of my old life were their problem to clean up now. I was busy building a new one. The next 6 months passed in a blur of positive change. The contract with Mr. Thompson's company was everything he had promised and more. My career soared. The promotion came with a salary that was life-changing. For the first time, I wasn't just comfortable. I was secure, truly secure. With that security came a new kind of freedom. I sold my small apartment and bought a house for me and Leo. It wasn't huge, but it was ours. It had a big backyard with an old oak tree that was perfect for a tire swing. The day we moved in, Leo ran from room to room, his laughter echoing off the empty walls. "This is our house, Dad?" he asked, his eyes wide with wonder. "Just ours. Just ours, buddy," I said, scooping him up in a hug. We filled that house not just with furniture, but with new traditions. We had Taco Tuesdays and Friday night movie forts. We adopted a goofy golden retriever puppy and named him Comet. I taught Leo how to ride a bike, a brand new one that we picked out together, and I ran alongside him, cheering him on, my heart swelling with a pride so pure it felt like sunlight. Our Friday night movie forts became sacred. We'd drag every cushion and blanket into the living room, building an elaborate structure around the couch. We'd make a big bowl of popcorn, the real kind on the stove, and crawl inside with flashlights. Tucked away in our cozy, self-made world, watching a movie, the tense, performative holidays of the past felt like they belonged to another lifetime, to another person. There were no cutting remarks disguised as jokes. No seating charts based on favoritism. No suffocating expectations. There was just the warm glow of the screen, the smell of buttered popcorn, and the feeling of my son's head resting on my shoulder, safe and content. This simple, loving ritual was more of a family celebration than any of their lavish, toxic gatherings had ever been. The change in Leo was the greatest reward of all. The quiet, hesitant boy began to disappear, replaced by a confident, happy kid. He made new friends at his new school. He joined the soccer team. His laughter became a constant sound in our home. The shadows in his eyes were gone, replaced by a bright, curious spark. He was healing. We were healing together. We spent that first summer working on a treehouse in the backyard. As I watched him carefully hammering a nail, his tongue stuck out in concentration, I saw the future. I saw years of this. Years of peace, of joy, of unconditional love. I realized that for my entire life, I had thought of family as something I was born into, a debt I had to pay, a burden I had to carry. I was wrong. Family wasn't about blood. It was about who you chose to build a life with. It was about who cheered for you, who protected you, who loved you not because they had to, but because they wanted to. My family was right here, in this backyard, covered in sawdust and sweat, building something new. It was small, just the two of us and a goofy dog. But it was strong, and it was real. One afternoon, sorting through the mail, I found a thick envelope with my mother's familiar, spiky handwriting. There was no return address, but I knew. My first instinct was to throw it away, to not let her poison touch our new life. But curiosity, and a faint, lingering need for closure, made me open it. It was a 5-page letter written front and back. It was not an apology. It was a masterpiece of self-pity and blame-shifting. She wrote about how they had lost the house. The auction had been humiliating, she said. All the neighbors watched. It was all my fault, of course. If I had just been a better son, if I had just helped them one last time, none of it would have happened. She wrote about having to move in with Daniel and Jessica. Their house was cramped, she complained. The kids were loud. Daniel was stressed all the time. She painted a picture of a miserable, fallen from grace existence, and it was clear she expected me to feel guilty about it. The most telling part was about Leo. We have always struggled to connect with him, she wrote. He was always so quiet, so sensitive, not like Daniel's boys. We tried, but it was difficult. You have to understand that. Struggled to connect. It was the most pathetic, cowardly excuse I had ever read. They hadn't struggled. They hadn't tried. They had passed judgment on an innocent child and found him lacking. The letter ended, as I knew it would, with a request for money. Daniel had lost his job, his boss was an idiot, naturally, and they were in a bind. Could I just help them with rent just for a few months until they got back on their feet? A final loan. For the sake of family. I read the whole thing, standing there in my sun-filled kitchen. Comet, our puppy, nudged my hand with his wet nose. I could hear Leo laughing in the backyard, playing on the tire swing, and I felt nothing. The anger was gone. The hurt was a distant, faded scar. All I felt was a profound, weary pity for this woman, my mother, who would go to her grave without ever understanding what she had lost. She hadn't just lost a house. She had lost a son. She had lost a grandson. She had lost a lifetime of moments like this, of laughter in a sunny backyard. I walked over to the fireplace we had used for the first time a few weeks ago. I took out a match, struck it, and held the flame to the corner of the letter. I watched as the pages curled and blackened, her spiky, accusatory words turning into gray, weightless ash. I watched it burn until there was nothing left. It was the funeral of my hope for them, and the birth of my complete freedom. I let the ashes go, and I went outside to push my son on the swing. It's been a few years since that day. Life is good. It's quiet. The work I do with Mr. Thompson's company continues to be challenging and rewarding. But the best part of my life begins when I close my laptop for the day. It's in the messy art projects on the kitchen table, the sound of a soccer ball thumping against the garage door, and the nightly ritual of reading one more chapter, even when it's past bedtime. Leo is thriving. He's a happy, well-adjusted kid who is kind to everyone he meets. He never asks about his grandparents. It's as if that chapter of his life was a bad dream he has long since forgotten. I know the scars might still be there, deep down, but I also know he is surrounded by so much love. From me, from his mom, from our friends, that those scars will never define him. He is not a mistake. He is a miracle. Sometimes, late at night, I think about them. I know from Mrs. Gable, who still calls to check in, that they still live with Daniel. Nothing has changed. The cycle of blame and dependency just continues to spin. I don't hate them. I don't wish them ill. I simply don't think of them. They are characters in a story from a long time ago, a story about a different man. I learned a hard lesson. I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself, and for your children, is to walk away. You can't set yourself on fire to keep others warm. You can't fix people who don't see that they are broken. You can only save yourself. Looking at Leo, now a lanky preteen who is starting to look more and more like me, I know I made the right choice. I broke the cycle. My son will grow up knowing, without a single doubt in his mind, that he is loved, that he is wanted, and that he is the most important thing in his father's world. And that, right there, is a better inheritance than any house or any amount of money. It's everything. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to protect yourself or your loved ones? I'd be honored if you'd share your thoughts in the comments below. And please, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next.